History Showcase and the Muskegon County Museum in Michigan return to the Hackley House.
One of the key elements of a Queen Anne house is that you should be able to look at it a second time and never see the same thing twice. We find this throughout the architectural elements as well as in the interior decorative treatments. Now, the first part of this episode was filmed over at the Muskegon County Museum, where we have produced an exhibit that explores the topics that we've discussed in the first half of the show. We've now moved across the park and are standing in the Muskegon Museum of Art, where the second half of the exhibit is on display. This part of the exhibit takes those individual architectural elements out of the context of the house and explores them for the rich and varied splendor on their own right. An example is the side door. When viewing the house, the detail of this door sometimes gets lost. We can see the horseshoe mihrab design that we've been talking about. We can see the wood carving that has been described. But just looking at this door, it becomes an art object itself. And this, I think, points out the importance of all of the variety of details that we find in the Hackley House. One element of the job of historian that I enjoy most is the fact that we're quite often involved in detective-like work. In doing research, we uncovered these photographs of the interior of the house. This particular one is of the first parlor. And in going through and listing the objects and the different decorative items, we see centrally located this portrait of Julia Hackley. We're extremely fortunate that that portrait in this 100-year-old photograph is still in existence. And as we complete the interior restoration of this room, this portrait will be returned to its original location and placed in the display. It's important in our restoration efforts that we not only understand exactly how the building looked and how it worked, but also to understand why. In taking a look at the decorative elements, both inside and out, we look for the influences that affected not only the architect, but the Hackley family and their own individual tastes. An example is this building, the East Indian Building, in 1893. Located at the Columbian Exposition in Chicago, it shows the influence of the Moorish Revival style as it affected design and taste throughout the United States. We know that the Hackley family was well-read and well-traveled, and that they were heavily influenced by the newest and latest in designs and fashion statements of the period. Recently donated to the museum, we know that this piece of furniture had a prominent place in the Hackley's interior decorative scheme. It's actually a small curio cabinet, but once again, it's a prime example of the varied texture and design that would have been found in every single item in and around the house. In the collaboration to research and produce this exhibit at the Museum of Art, we've worked closely with the staff to take a look at the decorative elements and the artistic styles found in the Hackley House. Standing here with me is Henry Matthews, who is the curator and currently interim director of the Museum of Art. And I've asked Henry to join us to get some of his insights into the design elements and styles that we find in the Hackley House. Welcome, Henry.
Hello, thank you. Welcome to the museum.
In taking a look at the objects that we've taken out of context and brought here into the galleries, what has been your reaction and the public's reaction in taking a look at these objects and the designs behind them?
Well, I think the first thing that hits you is how rich and intricate they are, which is something that sort of gets lost when they're in context. Mm-hmm. You know, the rooms are so richly decorated, there isn't a relief space anywhere, and that's what makes it wonderful. And it was completely in keeping with the tradition and the times and the modes of the times of the late 19th century to have a house that was just filled with a great variety of styles and materials and lavishness. And so there's nothing wrong with that. The nice thing is by pulling these things out, these objects out, and having a chance to look at them in an almost, I don't want to say sterile, but isolated manner, you can suddenly recognize and appreciate the incredible detail and the skill involved in producing just these items on a single basis. When you look at these chairs, they become sort of a tour de force of not only of carving but also of design, because we're dealing with so many different mixtures. We're talking about the basic shape of the chair is that of a great medieval chair that would have been used at the head of a table or possibly even as a throne. But and the material is there as well. But then the detailed carving, the twisted columns, a reference to Solomonic columns. You can see that at the Cathedra Petri in Rome, the great Bernini columns, and a reference to originally the temple of Jerusalem. And then the rich carvings here, these acanthus leaves, which are reference again to the classical world, the Roman world, and will be picked up again in the Baroque period and now mixed together with this basic medieval style. I mean, they don't really make sense when you start taking them apart, but that's the fun of it for us, because we're looking at them with hindsight and seeing where they borrowed from all these different times. Now, you know, the lines are great fun. They're almost cartoon-like, and I don't know that they were intended to be funny, but they certainly strike us that way today. I think
here
they're
in this
wonderful.
day and age, yes.
Today, right. 80 years later, 90 years after they were made.
Well, Henry, when you take a look at these objects, and when you look at the historic photographs that we've uncovered of the interior of the house, it appears at first glance that it is just a mixture. It's a jumble of things. But through your eyes as an art historian, is this just a mishmash, or is this a carefully designed and constructed environment that was built for the Hackleys?
Oh, I think it's absolutely a carefully designed environment. I think somebody really thought about what was going in here. The use of materials, the different woods, the carvings, the color scheme, which we're just beginning to put back together again through all kinds of clues, and you're working with restorers to find those. This is not a happy accident. This is a very carefully planned environment, and is an environment that was meant to be read by the visitor as in very specific messages were being sent. It says, you know, I'm an important social person, I have the best taste, I have lots of money, this is where it's happening, this is sort of the apex of society. And I think that's exactly what was intended to be conveyed, and I think that message is loud and clear.
And those kinds of visual statements that we're reading from the photographs and that are coming out through the restoration process, those were the types of statements that a well-to-do person would make and communicate in a home of the period.
Absolutely, because that strata of society, really when we start to think about it, these are all self-made men and women, but they're imitating something else. They're imitating the European aristocracy, which has been in these kind of homes for centuries. And in Europe, they would have lived, a house like this might be 1,000 years old or 500 years old, and they might actually have a medieval chair and a Roman example and all. But in the 19th century, the style was to mix and match and put it all together and borrow from everyone. But of course, in this country, we're so young and so new, we didn't have all these styles to borrow from. And we don't have the old things, so we're making up our own versions of them. And that's exactly, I think, what happened here.
Throughout this program, we've been taking a look at the history and significance of the Hackley House. I think we've also been taking a look at Charles Hackley the man. We've been taking a look at how he amassed a fortune, the house that he built for his wife, and how he himself lived. I think that one of the regrets that I might have as a historian is that I've completed so much research and investigated this man's life so much that I feel that I know him, and yet we'll never have the opportunity to meet him and to shake his hand.
Next on The Real West, hit the trail with Meriwether and William, a.k.a. Lewis and Clark, as they chart the vast unknown West. And tonight at 8 Eastern, 9 Pacific on History Alive, Germany's brilliant pilots push Britain and its allies to restore the balance in the air on 4 years of thunder.